We are 38 days away from Iowa State football season starting back up, and we've had a lot happen over the last week to last month to obviously the end of last season. We've got a lot to talk about today. So we've got three things that we're going to go over today, starting from worst to getting progressively better. The first thing we're going to talk about is an On3 reporter ranked Iowa State 100th on his rankings, which is just absolutely unbelievable. Phil Steele was his name, ranking Iowa State 100th. And this came out, I think, a few weeks ago. Actually, I think it was the first week of July. Today is not anywhere close to that time. But I get that we have an entire new team this year, but a lot of it does not make sense because it's like, yes, we do have an entire new team, but also that entire new team went 6-6 last year and made a bowl game, or 7-6, whatever it was. And I don't know. I definitely would understand being down in like the 60s or 70s, but all the way back to 100. I mean, we're behind Hawaii, Toledo, North Texas, Colorado State, Washington State's actually 95th, who pretty much is our entire new team is from Washington State, obviously. Eastern Michigan, Jacksonville State. What are we doing here? East Carolina, Marshall, Air Force. We're behind Louisiana Tech, for crying out loud. I mean, when I saw this, I could not really believe my eyes that much. Western Michigan's another one, which I guess they're okay. They're a solid G5 program. The closest Power 4, Iowa State's also the lowest ranked Power 4 conference team on this list. The closest one to us is 91st Boston College, which they're obviously not very good. But some of these other teams, too, that I looked at, like Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Northwestern, Wisconsin, or Purdue. Like, to me, none of these teams really make much sense having them listed higher than Iowa State at all, especially if you're comparing them to last year. And I get it too, because you don't really know what Iowa State has to offer this year. I mean, an entirely new team, entirely new staff. But I mean, some of the additions, though, when you look at it, which is what we're going to get to next, or in our final segment, that's what we're going to get to. When you look at some of the additions that Iowa State brings along between Jalen Rayner, between some of the offensive line coming from the SEC, and our defense looks like they're going to be incredible this season. Well, I shouldn't say incredible, but it looks like they'll be about the same level as they were last year with Matt Campbell in the 3-3-5 defense. Obviously, we're switching to the 4-front defense this season, which I think the 3-3-5, not to get super off topic here, but the 3-3-5 worked solid for what it was, but you have to have certain capable players to do a 3-3-5. In the Big Ten, where Penn State's at, where Matt Campbell's at now, personally, I think the 3-3-5 could do really, really well if they stick with that, but obviously they don't have John Heacock. Obviously, he retired, so interesting to see what they'll do there with their defensive line. But back to this whole ranking Iowa State at 100th, just looking at this, and obviously this isn't like an official ranking, obviously it's not like what it actually is, from team to team. This is just one reporter from On3, but just to have them that low is just absolutely astronomical. I mean, we're ranked one above North Dakota State. It's their first year in the FBS, and we're ranked one above them. That just does not make a whole lot of sense to me. We were ranked ahead of Oregon State, who obviously is not a Power 4, but they were Power 4. Now they dropped down to G5, whatever, G6. But yeah, I don't know. I don't. Again, I think more of a fair assessment would have been around 70, around 60. I could have seen that 100%. Some of those teams around that area, you've got North Carolina, Texas State, Colorado, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Purdue, as I mentioned before, James Madison. Like Oklahoma State and Purdue, I don't see why. What is this? Oklahoma State's 64, Purdue 65. Purdue's been historically one of the worst college football programs, especially if we're talking the last 10 years, like the Matt Campbell era. Purdue's been at the bottom of the Big Ten every single year. And to put them with Oklahoma State, who I think is going to be much improved this year, obviously, because their entire team is from North Texas pretty much. And North Texas, obviously, a very solid team. How are we putting Purdue and Oklahoma State on the side? That part just doesn't make sense to me at all. And then you have Syracuse, just two spots below Purdue, which that area makes sense, but also having Oklahoma State mixed around with those teams, it's not really making much sense to me at all. So, I don't know. We are going to move on to our next segment, though, which is Jimmy Rogers using getting picked 16th as motivation. I'm sure most of you guys probably saw this by now, but Iowa State is predicted to finish last in the Big 12, somewhere between a 2-10 to 4-8 record, which I don't necessarily disagree with, and I'm not really talking about my agreements or disagreements here with what I think we're going to get picked as. If I am implementing my opinion, though, I don't think it's going to be 16th. I think we will be pretty low. I think it'll be anywhere from 11th to 8th being our ceiling, maybe 7th. I don't see us doing amazing, but also our schedule is not horrible for a first-year coach, especially a first-year coach who is bringing most of his team over from Washington State. And I think that plays also a really big role into this, is because Jimmy Rogers knows a lot of the players he brought from Washington State because he played with them, obviously, and a lot of them were also with him at South Dakota State as well. And we'll get into one guy in specific in our next segment, but this whole 16th thing, again, me personally, leaving my personal opinions out of it, or trying to at least, Jimmy Rogers is using it as motivation. If you guys saw his interview at the Big 12 Media Days, he straight up told them, he's like, well, I picked Iowa State to win the championship, the Big 12 championship game. Like, I'm not gonna tell my guys that I think that they're good enough and then not pick them to win it, which I think is a really, really good mindset to have and a really good mental ability to have, especially like all these other coaches that are telling their teams that they're good enough to win it, to win the Big 12 championship game, and then they see that their own coach did not pick them to win. It's like, how do you believe in your team like that? So it's just kind of, it is cool, and also just kind of gives you a sense of the feeling like that this guy definitely knows what he's doing. Like, he's meant to be in this position because he's already picking his team to win the conference in his first season. And he's telling his guys, you guys are legitimately good enough, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to prove it by telling the media that this team is good enough to go out there and do it, to tell them that we're good enough to go out and win the Big 12. And this kind of just reminds me a little bit too of Arizona State when we had to play them a few years ago in the Big 12 championship game. They were picked to be last in the conference. They ended up obviously beating us in the conference championship game, and playing Texas in the playoff. Like, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, because the chances of that happening are very low, but obviously they can happen. Obviously, we saw with Arizona State, like I just said. So it is cool to see our coach use it as motivation. Obviously, I would hope we would have a coach like that would use something like that as motivation, but to actually go out there and do it in front of the stage like the Big 12 Media Days is even better. It's even more perfect than you would think it would be if he was just telling it to, just his players or whatever. Going on that note, we're going to talk about some of the exciting new players that we have on this year's team. Obviously, we lost a lot of players to Penn State and just in general, and we are going to go over a few of those actually, because some of these, I get it, Matt Campbell leaves, a lot of the team leaves as well. But some of these players that I was looking at, I just looked over the roster again because I was just like, I want to see, like, where did all these players actually go? If they didn't go to Penn State, where did they go and why? And some of these players I really don't understand. Where was the first one? Abu Sama. I've seen a lot of back and forth comments on this online. I think Abu could have and should have been probably the starter this season had he had stayed, because Carson Hansen to Penn State obviously makes sense. Abu Sama to Wisconsin does not make any sense to me at all. I'm sure money was involved there, and Wisconsin probably paid him more, offered him more. But that one still, to me, just something does not seem like what, I don't know. And my college football 27 analogy here, like you're a little, obviously not super far away, but you're farther away from home. I mean, he's from the Des Moines area, so being in Ames means you're about 40 minutes to an hour away. Being in Madison, Wisconsin, now I don't know exactly how far that is, but I think it's around like 6 to 8 hours, something like that. And again, I'm sure money was obviously a big factor in that, but to me, that's just one of the transfers that did not make much sense at all. Another one would be Dylan Lee going to UCLA. Not necessarily saying that he should have stayed or could have stayed, but also Dylan Lee was one of the guys that we did not see much of in the running back room. And for him to go to a historic program like UCLA, who typically has a very good talent, obviously they have not in the last couple of years, but to see him go somewhere like that just kind of makes me wonder, not necessarily wonder, but it's just like, yes, you have opportunities, but also what about your opportunity that you had at Iowa State, at a team that you have been at a team that you would have possibly had a chance to make more of a name for yourself than you will at this other program. Again, not saying Abu Sama can't make some noise at Wisconsin. Obviously, he probably will be the starter there. Dylan Lee, I don't know who necessarily UCLA has at running back, but that one to me is probably the more of like, this really doesn't make any sense, because you probably would have had more of a chance at playing more at Iowa State than you would have at UCLA, especially like I just said, the historically great program. NIL funds probably very high there, I assume. Well, obviously they are, but I don't know, that one just did not sit right with me either. The next one that we had, let's see, I'm just going through the list right now. Xavier Townsend and Purdue. Obviously, I just mentioned Purdue in one of the last segments about where they're ranked at. This one also, I mean, maybe just a better coaching staff, maybe just a better fit for him, which all that, more money, completely understand that as well, obviously. But this is just another one where it's kind of just like, you probably would have had more of a chance at Iowa State to get more playing time. And Purdue, obviously, that's also the weird thing, too, because Purdue historically is not a very good football program at all. And he will obviously more than likely start there. So, I mean, I will say that's kind of understandable, but it's like you definitely took a step down going to Purdue. Obviously, you're in a better conference, which means you're going to be playing tougher competition, but still a little just kind of strange there. John Tez to USC, that one's normal. Obviously, I don't see much of a shocker there. The last one that we have, though, is Joshua Patterson to Wake Forest. This one I was very surprised of. To hear his name enter the portal, I wouldn't say necessarily surprising. I would have figured he would have went somewhere bigger, though, besides Wake Forest. Maybe not like a super big, well-known brand, but kind of anywhere from like middle to higher tier. I would not obviously classify Wake Forest. I would classify them as a middle to bottom tier team in college football, specifically Power 4. So just something else that was kind of surprising to me and stuck out a little bit. Moving on to players coming into Iowa State, players that I'm excited to watch this season. We've got two that I'm going to go in a little bit more in depth on. But some of the ones that I'm just going to mention out of the blue, we have cornerback from Arkansas, Jaheim Singletary. A lot of these guys that I'm going to bring up first are just big school names. This player is from Arkansas. Again, he's a cornerback. I think it's really interesting to see these bigger name schools, these SEC Big Ten players coming to Iowa State to play, because obviously they have, I don't want to say more experience necessarily, but not more experience on the field, but more experience playing against high-level caliber players. They have experience going against the best of the best players. Next, we have wide receiver Amari Hayes from Tulane. Obviously, he was a standout receiver at Tulane, so it'll be very fun to watch him this year. He's very speedy and quick, as well as wide receiver transfer from Michigan State, Evan Boyd. This is another guy who played against the high-level cornerbacks, who played against the high-level safeties, who played against the high-level linebackers, made moves against all of them. So he will also be another fun player to watch this year. Then we get into our offensive tackles. And this is really, really interesting to look at because we have Jake Taylor from Oklahoma, DeAndre Carter from Auburn, Gavin Brocious, I think is how you pronounce his name, from Michigan State, and then Masai King from Akron. And I believe, if I remember right, he was also being recruited by Alabama, if I recall correctly, which to see that we landed him is insane. And then there was another Auburn player in here somewhere, I think. I did not write it down, though. But yeah, these players, it's like they're experienced with the high-level caliber of play with the SEC and the Big Ten, which is exciting to get at Iowa State because it obviously not as tough of competition. I cannot speak right now, but still very high level. But I think that'll probably show in Big 12 play further down the line, and especially once this team starts to gel together a little bit more as well. Those players will definitely show up because they were coached in certain ways that maybe some of these other transfers from Washington State or the smaller schools like Tarleton State or Austin Peay, they weren't coached the same way that these other SEC or Big Ten guys were coached as. So those guys will be very interesting to watch this year. And then, of course, the two, I think, big names coming to Iowa State. Defensive end Isaac Terrell. I really look for him to make his presence known very early on in the season. Obviously, he was a standout at Washington State. I think he'll be possibly standout in the Big 12 this year. He might be the best defensive end in the Big 12, possibly. So very excited to watch him, of course. And then, of course, we got to talk about Jalen Rayner. Arkansas State transfer, almost beat us last year at Arkansas State. I am very, very, very excited to watch him play this season. He had more passing yards than Rocco Becht had last year. Obviously a very, very good runner, electrifying on the ground as well as through the air. His interception rate is a little high, but I think just his experience level will help that this year, just another year, playing. So yeah, I'm really excited to watch him play and see what he can do in the Big 12 rather than in the Sun Belt for Arkansas State. Obviously him throwing the ball to Amari Hayes and Evan Boyd should be a great thing to watch. I assume they'll get a lot of completions to those two guys. But yeah, so that is all we have for in this episode of Big 12 Deep Dive. We will be back with more Iowa State football coverage very soon. Peace out.